Did intersectionality ruin U.S. nationalism? Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and as an American, I love my country. Or, well, I've been trying to in recent years because I figured I might as well. It is, after all, the only place I've ever lived, and I've had a lot of great times here with a bunch of great people. Granted, being somebody who has lived exclusively in leftist echo chambers my entire life, I've definitely been one of those people who had a lot of animosity towards the United States because I heard the typical lines about the evils of capitalistic colonialism, and although I never went so far as to think that we are the true, real bad guys of the world, I definitely thought we were pretty messed up. But eventually you grow up, you learn a bit more about history, and you realize that despite what some people might try to romanticize involving the indigenous peoples of the world, it turns out that the drastic, huge majority of them were every bit as vicious, warlike, and often raped or enslaved people just the same as European colonialists, if not worse. So what should we do? Well, perhaps the best thing to do is to try to love our country and move forward in the most healthy way for ourselves, our neighbors, and our planet, because it's the only country we have. Unless, of course, you want to try to take over another landmass. Speaking of which, the alt-right seems to be interested in doing such things in relation to creating some sort of white ethno-state. Though not every person that most people consider white is actually white to them, especially not anybody Jewish, and they are really into Norse mythology. So perhaps they might look into taking over Greenland? Do they discuss this? Is this something that they want to do? Because it would make sense, right? But for us short-term realistic people, we have America, the grand melting pot experiment of a nation, the likes of which the world has never known. And although we are still over 60% European in lineage, full of people who are mostly kind of a Euro-mutt mix of breed at this point, a lot of people believe that diversity is one of our strengths, myself included. I think it's great to have a lot of different types of people around, so long as their children assimilate at least a little bit and they aren't religious fundamentalist wackos. And don't think I don't count white Christians who take things too far in that category, because I do. Also, as a gay guy who knows full-blown queer families who actually do find ways of breeding to potentially keep the population up if necessary, I obviously think that diversity in sexual expression and gender is totally fine and maybe even could end up having some evolutionary advantages somewhere down the road. However, at some point or another, when celebrating diversity, we began fetishizing it as a culture, and eventually that led to entire departments based around glorifying it at universities. And then somehow feminists decided that females should be counted as a minority for whatever reason, and now we have the widespread cult mentality that is intersectionality. See my video about it if you need a primer on my feelings. Link in the description. Again, I do value diversity as an individual, but where I think people took a wrong turn was when they started claiming that people who lacked majority status in their identity or who lacked circumstantial privileged statuses were somehow intrinsically better people than people of majority groups or people who came from positions of privilege. It sounds so obvious if you haven't been filled to the brim with the rhetoric of intersectionality. Why are straight white men who came from upper middle class backgrounds less noble, less knowledgeable, and less wise to the general cosmic ways of the universe than anybody else? Well, that's obviously foolish. They aren't. But it didn't stop there. No, it got much worse. Not only did this fetishization of minority groups, that is, intersectionality theory, begin to coerce us into demonizing the literal majority of our own nation based on immutable traits, crippling us to having any widely cast sense of nationalistic self-esteem, but even further, they then began elevating new categories as forms of virtuous oppression. At some point, some people began trying to claim that being overweight was basically an oppressed class. which is strange because that isn't even something that you can't change. Others began glorifying mental illness, which strikes me as potentially dangerous because I believe there are some mental illnesses that can be acquired. So we shouldn't encourage that. It truly is a bit difficult to be proud as a nation if these are traits that we uplift to the forefront of what is celebrated culturally. But of course, maybe more than anything, people eventually decided that Muslims and the holy text of Islam was perhaps the most persecuted category out there, due to it being completely antithetical to the West, and therefore it became the ultimate minority in the West. And now, so many people in our nation who value freedom of religion but have a general sense of secularism simultaneously worship Allah by proxy when they do everything they can to prove their acceptance of Muslims and Islam. All of this leaves me feeling very perplexed and wondering how we reconcile this problem. The alt-right seems to want strong nationalism back, but their way of going about it is based around the European identity, which seems irrelevant to me. I just want a nation that loves its people and a people who love their nation, no matter what color. If the two opposing sides seem to be the alt-right European ethnic Puritans who hate gays because they think we are degenerates, squaring off against the Islam apologists and flat-out Islamophiles of the regressive left, how do we find a useful and productive way to unite our nation to proceed into the future? These are questions I don't have the answers to, but hopefully a few people do. Drop me a comment, help me out on Patreon if you want me to keep making videos like these people do, and stay tuned.